We think of us as consumers of AI. We're thinking about LLMs models who do not do that job. They take data and they give you information. It's amazing to put a ton of data and ask questions. But if the data you're putting into it is not resolved and it's not trusted, well, it will make things up. It will give it to you with so much confidence that you may believe it. Everybody believes they have their own source of truth, but no one does. Right? There's no brain for the organization to be able to share data in a much more efficient way that's scalable and that everyone can use the data in the format or for the purpose of what they need it for.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Proc N Roll, your guide to practical procurement. Super excited about today's jam session. I'm joined by Stephany. Stephany is well known across all of procurement. She is a founder of Tealbook and basically one of the nicest people I know. She's spent now years and years working on various procurement services and consulting, but also being very focused on the data. We've all spent decades buying procurement tools and process tools, and frankly, maybe deprioritizing the data, which is the fuel really that runs these things. You know, we implement these systems, sometimes spending millions of dollars on these Ferraris, but then we kind of start putting, sugar and mud in the tank and expecting them to run like they should. So Stephany, welcome to Proc N Roll. It's amazing to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That's a great analogy on the Ferrari.
Well, I always love to ask my guests that come on here that have spent time in procurement, like what was I look back at your LinkedIn and you've had a really interesting back career in a lot of different roles. I think pharmaceuticals and just all sorts of things, services. What was the thing that kind of clicked inside of you that said, hey, I want to spend my career focused on procurement and supplier management?
It's funny. Someone said to someone else recently, like, Steph really loves procurement. And the person that knows me well said, it's not so much procurement, it's solving a problem that she saw. And I think most of us then fall in love with procurement before we got into procurement and then realize that procurement actually could deliver a lot of value. And the people in procurement, as you know, are all very driven by delivering value and are very resourceful. And a lot of people over the years have had this passion for either you have it or you don't. There's people that just get into procurement and they're like, this is just not for me. But the people that have stayed consistent, have stayed because they really love the function. I loved it for many reasons. I fell into it through my consulting business, which was not starting procurement. It was really to help companies find innovation. So it was a matchmaking service. The company was called Matchbook. And that came from my own experience working in pharmaceutical and looking for innovation. And I always found that the time I spent with vendors that would reach out to me for coffees and lunch that said they were so innovative never really turned out to be innovative. And I needed innovation because I was in a very competitive space. And so I started Matchbook with this intent that people that are working in big companies have a hard time finding innovation. And there is innovation, it's just hard to find. And you're spending a lot of time, wasting time when innovation needs to happen fast, especially if you're in a competitive environment. So Matchbook started in, my daughter is now almost 19. So 19 years ago was when I started business. And I was really fortunate before LinkedIn, Facebook was very new because I named it by putting a little question on Facebook. And my friends sort of pitched in some ideas of a name. That's how the name Matchbook came about, like sort of your matchbook. Remember the matchbook before that Matchbox, you put your phone number and it was sort of the way that you exchange information. Anyways, I started that business in 2006, 2007, was really fortunate, got a contract within the first week and that business was profitable, and grew just really nicely and organically. What ended up happening is, so I started working with big companies and then a lot of the people in my network went to start these biotech companies. This was the big biotech boom of 2010. And suddenly our friends became CEOs and COOs of companies. We're raising a lot of capital. And I was getting these ad hoc requests, like random things. I had no idea what they were. And so I would Google, like what's sterilization, what's, logistic, what's patient support, what's regulatory. And then it started coming and faster and more requests. And so I started building my consulting business to support these sort of sourcing kind of project-based tasks. As things evolve, I start seeing my clients essentially buying the same things with the same process, and they needed speed. And so reposition my consulting business to procurement functions for these biotech companies, and saw the value of building good procurement early prevented so many things to go sideways post commercialization because they had put the proper foundation in place. But what I start realizing and seeing quickly is that as they implemented software and systems that needed good data, I start seeing that it was really difficult to get good data. It was these ad hoc projects to clean data and implement, and then the data would basically start falling apart, right after this initiative. And the more systems, the more suppliers, the more complex. And it didn't need that many systems and that many suppliers for that problem to exist. And I start translating this to my bigger clients who had, 10,000, 25,000, 100,000 suppliers, and start seeing that a lot of the blockers in procurement were mostly by lack of having information or building workflow and processes to collect information about suppliers to drive decisions. And my question was like, there's the most amount of money that goes through the S2P process in the organization. That's where the most amount of money sits. And the data is really bad. And you can't answer easily questions. And the information is not shared across the organization in a way that's really seamless and available. Like how much money is being wasted if we can't answer? So that's sort of how it started. Now, I simplify the problem back then by saying, like, how can you share information faster about your suppliers? And so I had started more of a LinkedIn for suppliers in the early days of Tealbook, and then ran into data problems in doing that and some of the constraint that a lot of software providers or procurement teams have seen.
I remember when I was at Intel, like the first year, so this would have been like 1994. There was a guy named Scott, and he was the one guy that had access to the mainframe to run reports and get the data out. So as I was starting to, I was owning this IT category for the site, and of course you start having questions, right? You want to understand your business. Who are my suppliers? Who are my internal These are all common questions everybody has every day, right? And the answer was, well, you have to go talk to Scott. And Scott was in this powerful position of, I'm too busy, let's talk next week. Or I had to get through Scott. And so I was like, okay, that's enough of that. I'm going to learn what Scott does to get the data out. And so I went through this whole process, which include learning how to, write a SQL query so I could write a proper SQL query into the mainframe, and then all the things that can go wrong with that. The data ends up in a file directory on the mainframe, and you got to get it off the mainframe and then onto your computer. And then it's this weird jumbled text file, and you got to get that into Excel. And there was 20 steps in my process by the time I documented out in order to just take that one query and put it over here. I don't run into too many companies that have it at that level still, but it's surprising to me how difficult it is still for procurement, category leaders and leaders generally to answer these kind of basic questions. Now, hey, there's tariffs, or there's a pandemic, or there's something happening. I need answers. I need data. And all of a sudden we go, okay, well, I'll get back to you. Right. And then it's this panic, mad dash to find because we all have a Scott, right? Who's the data genius in our organization. It's oh my gosh, Scott's out on spring break this week. How are we going to do this? And nobody knows how, right? Because it's still really difficult.
Well, then that's it. A lot of companies have multiple systems. If you have one system, it's complicated. If you have multiple systems, and you multiply basically the amount of steps and work. And it's those data people that suffer, those Scott. Now, teams are bigger, there's more investments, and there's more Scotts around. But it's those people that really struggle because they're being asked for all these data requirements across multiple different areas of the business, and they can't easily do it. And there's a misunderstanding of the complexity of getting good data, and the business is just expecting good data as fast as possible without taking the time to actually understand what's required. And so there's a huge disconnect between, what data teams are doing, and they're trying their very best to give the data that's trusted, but the way that the infrastructure is built, even with AI, even with BI tools, even with resources, even building their own sort of ways of doing this, it's still not resolving the problem at scale in a way that can deliver. And Scott should be in a place to enable and more sort of manage the process versus being the blocker or the gatekeeper of data. It should just be accessible from the systems into the hands of people making decisions, or the systems that need better data to deliver the information that the people using the systems need. And it's that problem that I want to solve, and I've been, incredibly passionate about solving. And the way that it was solved back in the days, it was either Scott from a master data management, but that's only your data. And your data is not that great, right? So you only know what you know, and it's not that great. And so even if you can, today there's AI agent that you can use to look at your data, but you still don't have any authoritative ways to verify if the information that's sitting in your system is correct, or how it matches to one another. And then there's a lot more information you need to have about your suppliers that doesn't live in the organization, or suppliers wouldn't want to share. And then you get the other problem where you're depending on suppliers to come to portals. And that's really hard, right? Like Ariba, who had market share, who had the network back in the days, only relatively had 100,000 suppliers coming to their profile to update the information. That's out of millions of companies. And so you have another problem is compliance and the real pain of portal fatigue. And that's a real thing. And that's what I experienced when I built the initial LinkedIn for procurement. Is I was depending on suppliers to come to their profile. And that was a hard problem to solve, because even if our customers paid them, and we had this really sexy, build your social currency. The more you come in and interact, the more it's going to give you visibility to other customers alike. And even with that, it was still a constraint to get suppliers to come and update their information.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we're at Graphite, we're dealing with the same thing, right? I think at Tealbook and Graphite, we're looking at different sides of the same problem and trying to figure out how to bring value to it. So yeah, it's a tricky problem. And ultimately, I mean, I'm rather than, because I would love to just spend 10 minutes talking about how amazing Graphite is. That's not where I want to go right now. I want to dig into just kind of like some of the things that I see happening. I remember when I got to Adobe, Adobe was paying a quarterly contract with one of the big procurement tech names that we all know out there today to take a download out of the ERP and to crunch it and clean it and then give it back to the organization. And what was really odd about it is that, if I'm in charge of a category in that model, I would pick up my piece of the spreadsheet and I would go like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And I immediately start modifying the new source of truth, right? Without, in the context of what I'm thinking about, which is my category. And I might be moving spend, like this is not my spend, because I want my percent savings against my spend number to be big, right? Like that's what I'm like, I need to be able to go report that I'm saving, 10 or 20% against the total spend. But nobody's picking up that other spend. And frankly, it's just this mumbo jumbo sort of a way to do things. And then next quarter, we're back to it again and we do a download and we send it out to some third party to clean up the data and bring it back. I'm sure you've seen this lots of times.
What's interesting is that everybody needs, like to your point, like you're in a role, you need the data for a certain task. You're looking at the data and you're doing your own enrichment, your own analysis on it for your own purposes. That doesn't get back to the organization. And everybody needs good data, and everybody has their own unique ways to and structure of how they want the data, and how they're using the data may be vastly different. And so everybody's, and a company said that recently, like everybody believes they had their own source of truth, but no one does. Right? There's no brain for the organization to be able to share data in a much more efficient way that's scalable, and that everyone can use the data in the format or for the purpose of what they need it for. Because like you got finance, it's not just procurement, right? You're going to finance, you're going to risk and compliance, you're going to ESG, even some revenue teams need supplier data. So everybody needs it in the company, and it's just living in these little pocket of silo, these one-time recurring jobs that may be happening every 3 to 4 weeks just to do category management or spend analytics.
Yeah. So if you run into a procurement leader somewhere and they're in this cycle of kind of, cleaning the data every quarter, or every 6 months, or every year. How do you look at that problem, and what suggestions do you have for somebody that's kind of in that mindset? I mean, I always like to think about this idea of creating, because data comes from somewhere, right? It usually doesn't just show up. Like, there is process and systems and things that are generating data as a byproduct or even an end product. And I always thought we should design those processes so they create good data, like data hygiene built in up front. So it's like a self-cleaning data factory instead of a create bad data and then, go through these cleanup cycles that we're talking about. But I'm curious how you look at that, and maybe any examples you've seen that would help somebody look at their process and figure out where is the bad data, where is badness sort of being injected into that data factory that they have.
I mean, that's a problem that we're solving, right? Because, I mean, in working with some of the most advanced and sophisticated data teams, we've tried, like, we're talking about Fortune 50 companies who have robust data teams and all the tools. Like, I'll take an example of a company that has 650,000 records across multiple systems, and they've implemented an onboarding tool and a risk, a third-party risk management tool, and they have sourcing tools. They have the whole suite of Ariba. So they have a lot of tools, but the data team is really struggling because they don't have any authoritative ways to be able to verify and consolidate this data in an automated way. Like, data is coming so inconsistent in structure across all these different systems. It may have the same, or different naming conventions. It may have incomplete information. And so all this work, and there's so many edge cases, like the amount of edge case keeps coming back. So they just can't get on top of it. Another company that we work with has 13 or 16 ERPs. So they're migrating now to Oracle Fusion. And so that's a ton of data coming from different systems. A lot is the same suppliers. A lot of the same suppliers are in the same system multiple times. And they can't use AI to resolve this. It's not there yet, or I think it will get there in the future. It's just not there yet to know what's the truth. The AI agent needs to know with more certainty, or they will make things up, right? And so, and in their case, they're in the middle of 2 M&As on top of that. Plus, they want to bring regions that they don't have systems. And so they're working with a consulting firm, and the consulting firm is doing more of a spend sort of, like a sourcing initiative to try to optimize spend. They're trying to get access to the data. Like, the data, like, it's so messy. The data team doesn't even have, and procurement is waiting to have good data to be able to fuel, data for this consulting firm that can't do the work unless they do the massive cleanup and reconciliation. So the problem that I want to solve is that shouldn't be a problem, to your point. Like, that should just be coming out of your system. The data should go through a process, get reconciled, get matched properly, get a confidence on the quality of it, should get enriched, and then should become available. And that's, and it should roll up in the way that you want to see it. Sourcing wants to typically see a company. They don't need to see every single line item, right? Every single entity of a company if they're managing a category and they're managing spend. But finance and other departments may see it line item by line item. And so everyone wants to see in a bit of a different structure. That's the problem, is like, how do you go from good hygiene, good quality data, the consumption and availability of it, and then the consumption comes with sort of how do you need to consume it, and how do you want to see the data so you can consume it. And nobody understands that on the business side. All they want is just the good data to do their job, right? Or even better, I just want the numbers so I can translate the numbers, I can do the job. And so there's a lot of complexities that often gets oversimplified by the business. I'm talking the business being procurement versus like what's happening on the data team and the data infrastructure. But to your point, it should not be in 2026. It shouldn't even be a subject of conversation. And you hear it right on stage at conferences so many times. Like, CPO says, you need good data. Data is the foundation. In order to leverage AI, you need this good data. But no one talks about how hard it is, right? And how to fix it.
Yeah.
Like,
in the end, I mean, I'm listening to your examples. I see like the examples like that all the time. And I think the only practical solution. I mean, if you're going to get to an end game there is to build data quality into your process, right?
You can't do that if you can't resolve it and get the right to the right entity. Like
there's a number of steps. My point is that maybe if you're in a really simple environment, you don't have the sort of competing 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 different ERPs that kind of have their source of truth that is competing against each other. But ultimately, I mean, you're in a place either where you're creating questionable data. Everyone's creating questionable data of some level of data quality. Maybe it's 50%, which is probably really bad, up to, I don't know anyone who has this kind of data sort of above 95 or 98%. Like, it'd be really difficult to get to those numbers. But the only way that you can get there is build a design for it. I'm not saying that the data machine itself can work independently in that design, but you can't just continue to stack layers of your tech stack on top and ERPs all together and then end up with this giant data mess like you're talking about with hopes that you'll untangle that hairball somehow. Like, I think you've got to go into it with a intelligent data design built into the process. Okay, this is where I can fix the problems that are creating bad data. This is where I can standardize on a source of truth or one record that I can, one supplier record that I could, correlate across all of my systems. I mean, there's a whole lot of different things that you can do. But my point is, if you don't step back and invest at a certain point and saying, look, the data is important. It's a problem today. We have to have it, like you said, for all of these different aspects of the business. Okay, what's the game plan going to be? And like I said, you can put it in a box and you can ship it out to a third party and say, clean it up for me, which it's not going to come back at 100% anyway. But whatever they bring back, you're still stuck in this place where you've got a hairball until you start working your way back upstream to wherever the bad data is coming from and figure out, how do you fix it the best you can there.
Like, listen, I mean, I've raised millions of dollars to solve this problem, right? And the problem was way more complex than I knew it was complex. It's way more complex and I hear still today companies that we're engaged with or we're talking to, and they decide to go and build their golden records internally. And it's painful to hear because we are on the other side working with companies who have done this and failed. Right? They oversimplified or thought that they could work with IT and other, resources internally and build this golden record. And in the end, it was just not scalable and delivering a quality and the scale that they wanted. And there's ways to avoid that. Obviously, we build a solution for that. Right? So that simplifies it. But it's millions and millions of dollars of investment. It's working across, as you know, over the years, like hundreds of companies suffering from bad data. In the past couple of years, we co-built with very sophisticated data team. Like, our ICP became less procurement. It became more the data team servicing procurement. And those are people, and we know and we qualify who we're talking to, because the moment you say, tell me about some of the challenges, and we're talking about, again, Fortune 50 company, someone came out of MDM going to data and analytics, building a spend cube for the procurement team. And he starts talking, and it's like all the problems. This is a smart person that understands vendor master data and is not getting, there's no light at the end of the tunnel because of, and it doesn't need to be that complex. You're saying, yes, of course, the complexities in highly regulated industries, there's more motivation, right, to get good data for all kinds of reasons. The more complex, then it's harder to be able to build solutions. But even less complex environment, we had a client describing it was costing them about $1.5 million a year just cleansing their vendor master. They're doing that through a third party. Then they're buying D&B data. Then they're matching it against D&B. So that process was happening every 3 weeks. Then they have to trust the D&B data, which is opaque, and there's no provenance or ways to actually verify the data. So then you have to verify the majority of the spend to make sure that the data is accurate if you're using it for regulatory or reporting purposes. And so that was happening every 3 weeks. It was a recurring event, redoing the same process. Even if they built some automation, it was still costing them about $1.5 million a year. And so that problem that's often misunderstood. And procurement shouldn't really care in some ways. They just want good data. But if they put the priority and the pressure, and we need to solve this, we need to invest in technology to solve that problem, it's going to deliver so much impact from all the different pieces of procurement. And as one of our customers at Kraft Heinz said, that having good data, when you're talking about 50, 60%, like when you have 90, 95 or 98% good quality data and you're able to trust it, one, you start to see all the use cases, all the opportunities to leverage the data. But what she said, that's Stephany Fink at Kraft Heinz, it changed the conversation with supply chain and finance, because now they have stewardship of the data. Nobody has been able to solve this, but if procurement can solve this, it's a huge opportunity for procurement to say, like, hey, we're going to take ownership. We've solved this. We have good data. Here's the good data, and how, because it's the same supplier that works in supply chain, or it, that needs to be fed to finance, or the risk and compliance that need to do this on this occurring basis. So if procurement can own this in a way that doesn't cost them years and millions of dollars, like, it's a huge opportunity to position yourself in a much more value add, right? Much more strategic for the organization, because all these agentic, all this AI, all these systems rely on having trusted, verifiable data that's easily available. And right now, I'd say 99% of organization doesn't have it.
Yeah. Well, and Gartner's forecasting that it's going to be many years until they do, right? Most organizations are going to be unable to take advantage of the automation from AI because of exactly this problem.
Like a nice example, and I it's so simple, but when we're on stage at DPW, like, I'm Stephany with a Y, right? This was Stephany with an F. There's probably a Stephany with an IE. And then someone in procurement or the CFO is like, how much money are we spending with Stephany? Well, once you have to figure out which Stephany you're talking about, right? And then you got to figure out that all the data under my Stephany may be Lapierre, maybe SL, maybe Lap Corporation. So they have nothing to do with Stephany, but they're all me. And so once you have to figure out which Stephany you're talking about and what information belongs to this Stephany, and then you have to have the data that connects. So all your contract, your invoice, your spend, all of that needs to tie into the right company and the right Stephany. Otherwise, the question of how much money are we spending with Stephany could be wrong in so many ways. So how do you ensure that that information gets, presented in a way that the CFO would trust and say, okay, this is exactly the amount of money we're spending with Stephany and why, and that I trust that this information is trusted, so I can have a conversation with, my supplier and have a negotiation that makes sense. And that's the problem right now, is how long it takes to get that answer back. And then do we trust that answer? And if you don't trust it, or you give the wrong answer, or you're putting bad, right? So it's a simple question that makes no sense in 2026 to not be able to answer when there's billions of dollars sitting in the source to pay process. And this doesn't get fixed by the Coupas and the Arebas, doesn't get fixed by the ERPs. The MDM solutions are great, but they're still very workflow based. They're not fixing that rooted cause of data. MDM doesn't have good data unless it's really, really well maintained, and that requires humans to maintain it. And humans are just not that great at maintaining data at scale.
So every conference you go to, everyone you talk to anywhere is talking about agents, agentic, and all these different things, right? So I think there's probably an underlying idea that people have that AI can clean my data for me. Like, I'll just like AI is going to fix this problem. I'd be curious what your perspective is, right? I know you've layered in AI into your broader solution and what you've built over time, but for the practitioner out there who's thinking, AI is going to fix this part of the problem, what's, rapid fire, quick answers here, because we're running short on time, but what would your feedback be?
So there's two ways to use AI, right? And the AI that we're using, we are using it, AI, and we're using it to fix quality data. But these are AI tools that have jobs within an infrastructure that's been built for doing entity resolution, right? Reconciliation, cleansing, enriching data. When we're talking about parent and child, like even matching to the right entity and resolving non-match. Like, these are all, we have AI built into our entire infrastructure. So we are using AI. But AI in itself, and how when we think of us as consumers of AI, we're thinking about LLMs models who do not do that job. They take data and they give you information. It's amazing to put a ton of data and ask questions. But if the data you're putting into it is not resolved and it's not trusted, well, it will make things up. It will give it to you with so much confidence that you may believe it. But even if you can't verify where this information is coming from, if this information is true, it can be very dangerous. And so AI, in the way that we're thinking about these tools that we want to implement, does not fix data. It will give you good answers to potentially bad data or bad answers that seem really good. And so that's a very important distinction. And I write a lot on this is why not, right? Because I think the technical maybe go over people's head, but it's, the easy answer is like it does not fix data quality issues. So just don't. And I've heard this from, I guess, CPO putting someone from sourcing into a data quality problem, and the person in sourcing is only solving it for sourcing, which can be dangerous because we're talking about a very niche use case. And then that person said, well, I'm using LLMs to fix our data quality issues. And you just know that they're going to waste money. They're going to waste time. And a year or two from now, the CPO is still not going to have quality data. And that could be resolved in 3 to 4 weeks. They could have a vendor master that's cleansed, automated, and written automatically. Yeah, I think you can skip through that by leveraging tools that have been built for that purpose.
Yep. I love it. I'm a big advocate of that as well. So, super lightning round here. I don't know if we can get through 3 questions, but we're going to try. So this is quick question, quick answer. You're a supplier now, not just in procurement. So what's the one thing procurement teams should do to make onboarding work better?
Well, get their data foundation and get great workflow, right? If you get great UI and great workflow, you're improving the experience. If you're able to verify against an authoritative data, so you're not replicating duplicates, or you're able to validate and enrich the data faster, it accelerates the process. And so I'd say it's a marriage between you and I.
Well, and I was going to pop up a picture of you and I in our, fancy dress and tux from a couple of years ago. I'll have to go find that here. But yeah, we've both been huge believers in the importance of solving these problems for quite a while.
And you need the UI. Like there's data that you're always going to need from suppliers. And so that's never going to be automated. And so you need the marriage of both.
Yeah.
A great UI is really important, but suppliers shouldn't have to put their information again and again. And there's information beyond what they would want to provide, or that they're capable of providing, or that the person answering the information may even have at their disposition. And so that's the acceleration.
Yeah. And you kind of have to trust what they give you, but also verify as well for all those things. Okay, so what is one procurement KPI that everyone tracks that actually means absolutely nothing in this new data era that we're talking about? Like, what's the KPI that you see bouncing around that drives you bonkers?
I don't know. They're so...
Okay, that's a random question. We can pass on that one, no problem.
Yeah, let's pass on that. Let's not for that. I would say savings, but there's so many topics around that. Like, the saving is the savings can be interpreted so many different ways. Plus, it's the permission to do other things. And so if you can get savings done and it's believable and it's, there's a good rationale, you can do it faster. It allows you to do so many other things in the organization to drive value. So I don't think we got completely away from the savings KPI from a procurement perspective.
No, it's table stakes, right? You need to deliver value, but definitely you can't stop there, right? There's a lot to do beyond that. Okay, so I don't want to say older Stephany because you're so young and beautiful, right? But if you look back to your 20 years ago, to your younger self getting involved in this problem from a leadership perspective. So think about all the people in procurement that are just getting in there and they're wanting to be a leader. They're wanting to achieve the kind of things that you have through your career. Like, what's maybe the one leadership lesson that stands out to you most that you kind of wish you understood earlier, or how do you look at leadership?
Well, I mean, it's a big question for me from a business perspective, and as a founder, I think that's true for if you're in procurement, is that I want to solve a big problem. It was too big. Frankly, it was too big of a problem to solve back in 2016, 2017. We start building ML models. We had, engineers to build models. And so we were one of the first users of AI in our space, and we were way too early. And so, if I were to go back, I would almost, like you've been focusing on the onboarding use case. It's a great way, it's a good wedge to fix a more foundational issues. And I think, we tried this with discovery, we tried this with diversity, but in some ways, like I wish I'd pared down the problem to something that was more digestible and consumable at the beginning, even if it was not the big vision. Like I was so believing in fixing this really big problem, but not everybody cared about the big problem or how far, this could sort of, how much impact. They really wanted to solve something today. And so as a visionary person, that's really hard because you want people to see the big picture, but people are, they're accountable for their KPI and they're accountable for their priorities. And so pare down something that has bigger potential. And that's true for pilots too. You get this big vision for AI. How do you pare down to something that people can understand, can start consuming, you can iterate, and then build, and continue to build that as you're getting feedback. And it may not look anything like what you had envisioned, but it will allow the permission for you to pilot something and try something that people buy into it. And so it took so long for us to kind of get to this, luckily for us, the market caught up. And for any organization, they will catch up that AI is so critical in all aspects of the business. So I'm not saying to not be visionary or not having these big ideas, but not a lot of people can digest or, conceptualize a big idea. But they have jobs every day that they need to do. If you can make those jobs easier and they can try it and feel confident, then you're going to be able to get more buy-in on change management.
What's interesting, I've always thought that leadership is being able to see the future, this visionary stuff you're talking about. But that's sort of one element of it. The other side is you actually have to be able to lay a path out that people can, because like you said, a lot of times people won't be able to see that long-term vision that you're envisioning. But then we kind of have to take that big vision and it might not be off, it might be off by 15 or 20 degrees. It's hard to say, but in the early stages, like, okay, this week, this month, this quarter, this year, what are the things that we're going to do that start moving us in that direction? And that makes it more tangible for people to understand. And I think along the way, hopefully data value can be realized along the way and not just we're all starving until we get, 10 years down to fixing world hunger, right? Like along the way, it should be delivering value.
That's right. That's right.
Well, that's awesome. Well, it's so good to meet up with you and talk about things that, we're both so passionate about, getting the data right, making the proper investments, prioritizing it, building governance. We could go on for another 2 or 3 hours. We may have to do this again and just go super deep, super long. I don't know, but I'm hoping to see you again on the road one of these days. I was at APC last week. I know I'll be over in London at the WPC and the DPW in New York. So
all the best conferences.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll see you there. You're always a bright light in the crowd and always a good friend to catch up with.
Thanks, Conrad. Thanks for the conversation. This was fun.
Thank you. Everybody, go ahead and comment, like, and share, and let's make sure everybody gets a chance to hear this amazing conversation. Thank you.